Senator, over the years, Reverend Wright has said that the U.S. government created the AIDS virus to kill African Americans. He has said instead of singing God Bless America, we blacks should sing God Damn America. How would you characterize Reverend Wright's
Well, I'd
remarks?
use the words of Barack Obama. He's totally rejected this as quickly as anything. He was not there when these statements were made. They were outrageous statements. I don't know how much more clear Barack Obama could have been on all of this. Obviously, these things come up. We've seen a lot of invective being used over the last number of weeks in the campaign. Doesn't help, obviously, but guilt by association is not typically American. We've all been around in places where people have given speeches or said things that we've thoroughly objected to, totally objected to. The fact that he was as quick as he was. I thought his comments yesterday, Barack Obama's comments yesterday in Indianapolis, recalling the words of Robert Kennedy with the death of Dr. Martin Luther King, talking about we're never going to accomplish anything in this nation of ours as a divided people. I think one of the qualities that Barack Obama is bringing to this candidacy is that ability to bring us back together again. President Bush talked about it 6-7 years ago. We never came close to it. The country wants that very, very much. And I don't think we help that cause necessarily by focusing exclusively on these kind of comments that he has totally rejected.
Well, you say he is quick to condemn them. Even if you believe that Obama was unaware of all these comments, this isn't one statement that Reverend Wright said. These are statements that go back, and the one that you just saw goes back to September of 2001, 6 years ago. Even if he says that he's unaware of that, he admits that he became aware of these statements last year. And yet, just last month, here is what Obama had to say about Reverend Wright's statements. He is like an old uncle who sometimes will say things that I don't agree with. And I suspect there are some of the people in this room who have heard relatives say some things that they don't agree with. An old uncle, he says. Senator, he only rejected these statements after these tapes became public.
Well, Chris, again, we can spend all morning talking about this. The American public are watching their foreclosure rates climb. Oil prices are going up.
Well, sir, you're changing the subject. I'm asking you.
Well, of course, this is a subject matter.
You don't think it's relevant that this man was a member of this church for 2 decades?
No, we've made it relevant.
And this fellow,
we've made it relevant here for the last 4 or 5 days in this network. But the fact of the matter is,
it's not just this network, sir.
I know, but the fact of the matter is, people like to move on to other things. I've answered your question.
Well, I'd like to. Well, no, I don't think you have answered it, because you said that he answered it, that he rejected it very quickly. He didn't reject it quickly. The fact is, last month, when he's known about it, he said he's a crazy old uncle.
Well, going back and reviewing at what point who said what to whom, we can dwell on that. He's rejected it. He said he doesn't have any association with it. He finds these comments outrageous. I don't know how much more clear he could be on the subject matter.
But he didn't find them outrageous and condemn them last month when we didn't have the videotapes.
Well, I'm not even sure he necessarily was aware of them until they became public here. I can't
That's not true. He says that he was aware of them when he started running for president in 2007.
Anyway, he has rejected them here. Whether he did it a month ago or a week ago, he's rejected them. I think that's the important point. And again, guilt by association here is something we've got to stay away from in this country. Anyone involved in public life, Chris, has been places, have been with people who have said and done things we totally reject. Running for president obviously revives a lot of this. But I think it's important about what he has said. What position has he taken? What sort of a campaign has he run? What is he calling upon Americans to be doing in this country? These are not the words of Barack Obama. So we can dwell on that, but I think we ought to move on. He's rejected it.
Senator, it isn't a question of guilt by association. Forgive me, if you read Barack Obama's book, Dreams from My Father, he talks about what a huge role Reverend Wright played in his deciding, his affirmation of his identity as an African American. He's been a member of this church for 2 decades. He was married by this reverend. His children were baptized in this church. It's not that he happened to walk into a room and Reverend Wright was there. He's been a member of this church, a member of Reverend Wright's flock for 20 years.
Well, again, Chris, look, you're a member of a church in a parish where you may have a pastor, a minister, or a rabbi who says and do things you totally disagree with. You don't necessarily walk away from your church.
You would stay in a church that had a... Well,
I would certainly disagree with this individual. We've all been in situations like that. But the idea somehow that this is deeply involved and ingrained, that this is really who Barack Obama is. What you're suggesting, or those who are making these accusations, if this is really who Barack Obama is, anyone who knows this man, who's worked with him, who spent time with him, would say this is totally unlike him. It's not him at all. And so the suggestion somehow that this is really who this candidate is, I think it's an unfair accusation.
Senator Schumer, are you troubled that Obama would belong to a church, be married by a minister, have his children baptized by a minister who says these kinds of things?
No, I agree with Chris here. Look, each campaign is wide-ranging. Supporters are all over the place. And you will find in every campaign, you have Senator McCain endorsed by a reverend who said very anti-Catholic things. You've had the problems our campaign had with certain statements that Geraldine Ferraro made. If you are going to ascribe what every supporter says, every word they say to the candidate themselves, you're going to just be in an unproductive. We have major issues facing us in America, whether it's the war, the economy, and I do believe, past elections have had too much emphasis on these things. This election won't, Chris, and the reason is people are worried about the future of the country and they want a real discussion on issues.
Well, let me just ask you, if I may for just a moment, this isn't just a supporter. This is a man who was the head of his church for 20 years. Are you telling me, because I'm a little surprised at this, Senator, you're not troubled that that Barack Obama belonged to a church which had a Reverend Wright, who said that the U.S. has sponsored state terrorism through Israel against the Palestinians? That doesn't bother you?
I know Barack's views on Israel, and I think they're very strong. I mean, as you know, I prefer Senator Clinton for a whole lot of reasons, but I don't cast aspersions on Senator Obama for what somebody else said. We'll be in a game here where we'll never debate the issues. We've spent half our time already on this, and it has nothing to do with Barack Obama's views.
Well, let me ask you, Senator Schumer, about something that someone in the Clinton campaign said.
How come that doesn't surprise me?
Well, there's a pattern here, Senator. Geraldine Ferraro, former vice presidential Democratic candidate, also a big fundraiser for Hillary Clinton, made her own controversial comments this week. Let's take a look at them. If Obama was a white man, he would not be in this position. And if he was a woman of any color, he would not be in this position. He happens to be very lucky to be who he is. Senator, this isn't just one isolated comment. There's a long list of comments like this. Why do members of the Clinton campaign keep playing racial politics?
Well, first, Geraldine Ferraro said she said those completely on her own. I know Geraldine. I've known her for 20 years. She says what she thinks. These comments were wrong. They were condemned by Hillary Clinton. Geraldine Ferraro is no longer part of the campaign. She had the grace to step aside on her own because she didn't want to make these an issue, and that's that.
And I agree with that as well. I've known Geraldine Ferraro as long as Chuck has, and I disagree with her comments here. But again, it's the same kind of thing. We can spend our time talking about Geraldine Ferraro and Jeremiah Wright, but the issues is where does Barack Obama stand? What are these major issues we face in the country? That's what people are really worried about. We've got a major, major problem in our nation. We need to get back on track again. And that's what people, I hope, are going to cast their ballots on come this November. Not about whether or not you agree with Jeremiah Wright or Geraldine Ferraro. That should not be the subject, central point of the debate.
And by the way, just one point, Chris, I think this election will be much more on the issues. The dramatic differences between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and John McCain are not only large, but they're right at the center of what's worrying people. When people are basically content, these kinds of minor issues, unimportant issues in my opinion, play a major role. But when people are worried about the future of this country as they are now, we're going to see a very interesting campaign where the differences on Iraq, the differences on the economy, the differences on health care and energy policy are going to make the big difference here and be most of the discussion. So I think, to dwell... Obviously, you can ask the candidates the question. And obviously, if they don't denounce what is said, if it seems so bad as these statements are, you can hold them accountable. But once they denounce them, let's move on.
Well, I am going to move on to the economy, but I would disagree with you to this extent, Senator Schumer. We don't know a lot about Barack Obama, and he does not have as long a record in public life as Senator McCain or Senator Clinton. And when I think a lot of us find out, and are somewhat shocked to find out what his ministers said over the last 2 decades, I actually think that's a very legitimate question in judging the character of a candidate. But let's move on.